Oh, good morning, Robbie.
Howdy.
Hey there, ho there. I'm just listening to my other computer on standby delay. So, Robbie, it's going to drive me absolutely insane if I don't turn off that echo. I will be back in 10 seconds.
Not a problem. And y'all see it right here, boys and girls. We are here live on the TMI Show, minus the Manila. I am the producer and very inadequate guest host,
Let's
Robby
try
West.
that again.
Over there, that's Ted Rall. He's the expert who's now going to do the intro, I think.
Yeah, that would be correct. Here we go. You are tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show. However, today it's the Ted Robby Information Show. Normally TMI for short, but TRI for short, where we give you way too much or way something which starts with an R information. Everything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, fat diets, what the kids are up to, blah, 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 blah. You know the deal. So we give you stuff you need to know, stuff you don't need to know, stuff that you want to know, and maybe more importantly, stuff you don't want to know. And hopefully we'll have a few laughs along the way. We are here every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to like and follow the show. Try to subscribe if you're on Rumble, the lower right-hand corner. On YouTube, you can also subscribe and support the show. And today we're going to have financial expert Aquiles Lorea, friend of the show. He's going to be joining us to talk about Trump's plans to attempt to reindustrialize America's heartland, where I grew up in Ohio and throughout the Rust Belt, and maybe to also try to bring back America's shipbuilding business. This is an industry that has been gone for many, many decades. We're going to talk about, is it realistic? And if so, what would it look like? What would be the pros and cons? This is an aspect, I'm proud of us talking about this. This was Robbie's idea. So, Robbie, thank you for this topic. I'm proud of us talking about it just simply because it is it's something, one of Trump's many initiatives that sort of mainstream press can be forgiven for letting it slip between the cracks. There's so much other stuff to talk about, and maybe this isn't quite as sexy, but it has some environmental and obviously industrial and economic repercussions that are well worth delving into, and that are not going to be likely to be seen anywhere else. So I always like to talk about stuff that we don't normally do anywhere else. Robbie, anything to add before we get into the headlines?
Just if Trump is able to deliver on this one promise, the actual rebuilding of the American middle class, it will revolutionize American politics for a generation, maybe longer.
I guess that brings about another question too. Is it possible to revitalize the middle class without reindustrializing? So are those two things necessary? Do they necessarily go together?
Well, the answer to that's no. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, look where we've been.
Well, I mean, couldn't we get there? Well, we can talk about that later, but we could. Certainly in the post-World War II period, the building up of the modern middle class as we knew it occurred as a result of the industrial base of the country. But it's like now we have we are in a post-industrial economy. We're in a knowledge economy. AI is taking over. I mean, maybe it's possible to redistribute the wealth and income that we have coming in from non-industrial sources in ways that would allow a middle class to prosper again. Obviously, the middle class is besieged in a major way these days.
It's dead.
But let's move on. Imagine that there were Jaws. Manila has the Jaws. Yep. Manila, by the way, Manila Chan she'll be back next week. She's on vacay. We are at a secret, undisclosed location. No, she's not hanging out with Dick Cheney. She has better taste than that. But she is in a secret, undisclosed location, and therefore we're not going to disclose it. Don't ask. Okay, here we go. Let's get into the headlines. The Trump administration has been holding direct talks with Hamas. Robbie, this kind of blew me away over the release of U.S. hostages held in Gaza and the possibility of a bigger deal to end the war. The talks held by U.S. Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Adam Bowler are completely unprecedented. The U.S. has never before engaged directly with Hamas because it's officially considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department. The meetings between Bowler and Hamas took place in Doha in Qatar in recent weeks. I know some people call it Qatar, but I prefer Qatar, and other people do call it Qatar. While the Trump administration consulted with Israel about the possibility of engaging with Hamas, Israel learned about aspects of those talks through other channels, one source said. I'm like thinking, well, Robby, you care to speculate what those other channels might be? Right.
Well, I've got some ideas. I mean, look how many people in Congress that AIPAC owns. People talk. I've never been to DC.
That hadn't even occurred to me, but that's true.
I mean, so that's what I would be thinking is that, hey, Trump is bucking our preferred ally in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East where you get to vote for the either worse or worser genocidal person. So
it's kind of like our system.
Poison. Yeah, pretty much.
They have taken up after us. I was thinking of Jonathan Pollard, the Israeli guy who spied on the United States. The Israelis spy on us. I mean, allies do spy on each other, but the Israelis spy on us. I'm sure that.
Well, the Israelis did it to that Jonathan Pollard dude. I mean, he should have been hung by his nuts till dead because the information that he stole, he turned right around, gave it to Israel, then sold it. So I mean, there's me reading your mail, but then there's me sending your credit card statements to the person that hates you. So there is a difference.
There is a difference. It's true. So the talks have been focused in part on trying to get American hostages out. I don't know. I didn't know there still were any. But they've also included discussions of a broader deal to bring back all the remaining hostages and try to reach a long-term truce. Remember, the last one expired on Saturday. There's no deal so far. My read here, and so, to me, the Trump administration has been a hodgepodge of good, bad, and ugly. And this has been, I would put this in the good category. This is, the administration likes to talk to anyone and everyone. And this seems to me like the way I'm reading this, Robby, you tell me what you think. I think this is Trump and the Trump administration writ large not trusting the Israelis. And they know that the Israelis don't want a peace deal. They don't want a long-term ceasefire, much less any kind of like two-state solution. So therefore, they're like, okay, we're not going to involve the Israelis anymore. We're just going to go in and talk directly to Hamas and get a deal done ourselves. Kind of like, to me, this is the same approach. It's analogous to directly approaching Russia, make a deal with Russia, then present it to Ukraine and say, this is the deal. Sign or lose your weapons. This is the deal, Israel. Like, sign or lose your weapons, or in this case, your money also. What do you think?
Well, I think that you're right. And I think they really touched on it, in yesterday's show. Trump regards war as a waste. It's a waste of human capital. It's a waste of lives. It's a waste of resources. And the biggest thing that I've seen that's different in the second Trump administration versus the first is that this time around, we actually have people that actually have an America First vision. Like, what is in it for the American people to just keep arming Israel just to go bomb its neighbors? What's in it for us? And so I think that Trump is, as opposed to the last time, he was completely surrounded by neocons. He's kind of taken a page out of Lincoln's playbook with the whole team of rivals idea, and has a difference of as people in his ear with a difference of opinions, and then he's actually listening and then making a decision that he thinks works best for him based on his instincts. At least that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think, look, I got to say, I'm Ted Rall, and I approve of this message. I mean, I'm all about it. I think it's great that the Trump administration will, has been talking directly to Hamas. That they didn't even talk to the Israelis to ask them for permission. Like, are you okay with it? Do you mind?
Well, why would you?
We're just doing it. We're the U.S. of fucking A. We will talk to whoever the fuck we want, and and that's it. And and I bet also, frankly, they're gonna get further than the Israelis did, because Hamas probably appreciates being talked to directly by the United States instead of being snubbed repeatedly. I mean, we think that if we treat everyone with a cudgel, that somehow they're going to react better. But I think showing some respect and treating people like human beings is hey, we should try it sometime.
Well, talking doesn't hurt. I mean,
talking doesn't hurt.
I cannot see a downside to this.
No, I don't see a downside either. I'm sure the Israelis are furious. I'll be very interested to read the Jerusalem Post editorial page tomorrow. Apple today announced its largest ever spend commitment. It plans to spend over $500 billion here in the United States over the next 4 years. This new promise builds on Apple's history of investing in the U.S., blah, blah, blah. We are bullish on the future of American innovation, and we're proud to build on our longstanding U.S. investments with this $500 billion commitment to our country's future. That, according to CEO Tim Cook of Apple. From doubling our advanced manufacturing fund to building advanced technology in Texas, we're thrilled to expand our support for American manufacturing, and we'll keep working with people and companies across this country to help write an extraordinary new chapter in the history of American innovation. So, Robby, I read the word American about 75 times in that statement, and I can't help but note the interesting time period of in the next 4 years. I'm like, what's
it's a Trump
4
effect.
Years? It's either the Trump effect or they were going to do this anyway, but they're trying to make it look like they're doing it for Trump.
I don't think they're going to do it anyway. I think what this is that they're reading the tea leaves. Trump has made it very clear that if you are an American company and if you're going to do business overseas, then you are going to pay more to do it. One of the things that Trump is really hawkish on, like I don't know if you saw or not, but I think it was on Tuesday, he put the leaders of Japan and China on notice, say, if you devalue your currencies, I'm going to slap even higher tariffs on you. So I think what Trump is trying to do is that he's trying to de-incentivize outsourcing of jobs to start bringing those jobs back. And I know we're going to kind of touch on this on the main topic, but if Trump is able to do this, he will win the populist right and left. If you win the workers, so I don't know if Trump is conscious of class or not. I'm assuming he is. The dude's a billionaire. But if he is, though, he's being very smart about it. He's making a play for the middle, and that's where you win.
Well, we'll see if that's true. I mean, certainly, I don't know. It's funny that you mentioned that because, the biggest challenge for those of us on the left is to try to build class consciousness among the working class and the petty bourgeois and the poor. But, I always think, well, you might not believe in class war, but class war believes in you. And who really believes in class war is the wealthy, because they're waging it and winning it every single day. So, I like the way you put that. I think there's going to be, I think it's completely fair. And I have been saying this for years, as you know, that if you want to do, and if you're a big corporation and you want to have access to American markets and our giant consumer market, which even though we're still, where Americans are suffering and all that, is still bigger than any other country. Yeah. We should be, you should have to build stuff and hire here in the U.S. You should have to hire American workers. Otherwise, we have the right to punish you. And well, I'm totally okay with that.
No, I am too. And here's the thing: is like before I started reading your book, for full disclosure, Ted gave me a copy of his book to read. What's Left?
Advanced copy. It's not out yet. Yeah.
Yep. And so I've been going through reading it, and before I started reading this book, I didn't know how to really articulate what it is I'm trying to say, and that's a big problem that people on the right have, because if you come from my school of thought, the whole idea of class is kind of foreign to you. So we have at least on the right, we have a hard time articulating that. So that's all on you. You actually gave me the vocabulary to actually be able to say what the hell it is I'm saying.
Well, I appreciate that.
Trump's making the play.
Yeah, Trump is making the play. All right, so let's keep going. President Trump, speaking of which, is expected to issue an executive action as early as today, calling on the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. It still makes me laugh that she, the former the WWE lady, is to take all necessary steps. Is she still married to Vince? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Anyway, I know Vince has problems. But anyway, to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. The move has been expected since early February, when the White House revealed its intentions to close the Education Department, but withheld the action itself until after McMahon got confirmed by the Senate. Now the Senate has confirmed her as of this past Monday to be the next and I guess possibly last Secretary of Education. Democrats voted unanimously against her after she publicly committed to getting rid of the Department of Education. The draft action instructs McMahon to act, quote, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, end quote. That's an acknowledgement that the department and its signature responsibilities were created by the United States Congress, are protected by statute, and cannot legally be altered in any way without the approval of Congress, which would, of course, require 60 votes to overcome a filibuster in the United States Senate. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say this is one place where Donald Trump's not getting his way. I don't think the Democrats are going to give him the votes, I guess the 6 or 7 or so extra votes that he needs in the Senate to overcome that filibuster. Republican presidents have tried to get rid of the Department of Education established under President Carter a lot of times, and they've always failed. And I understand the argument for it. To me, it's like mainly, the idea that, in this country, under our Constitution, local states and cities are in charge of education. And so what's the purpose of a federal Department of Education? On the other hand, think of the optics. I mean, we're already known as an anti-intellectual country, and the whole world will be like, look at the Americans. They got rid of their education department. Of course, most other countries have national administration of their educational systems. Everything's unified from the national capital. So they probably don't understand how it works here. Our system's unusual. It's close to unique, really. But it's going to make us, just give the rest of the world another reason to laugh at us. I don't think Donald Trump cares, but
no, I don't care either.
It's but I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, for me, I think I would prefer a federal system of education. I think it would be more efficient than the hodgepodge of local and state control. And I don't think whether you learn about whether you learn about science or whether you learn about evolution should depend on whether you live in like Kansas or whether you live in New Jersey. It shouldn't make any, we should decide whether we're teaching that to you one way or the other for the entire country.
Yeah. Now, this is where we have some daylight between us because I don't want the federal government involved in education at all. No, whenever I look at the Constitution, it's the entire purpose is to restrain the federal government. It's always supposed to do what it is specifically given power to do. Educating kids is not one of those things. So right there, they weren't. It is true that when the Constitution was ratified, there was no such thing as a public education system in the United States at all. That developed in the 19th century. And then over time, because it happened organically, right? It was like people created one-room schoolhouses on the frontier. Obviously, cities had different systems. There were lots of private schools, lots of religious schools, lots of and lots of just sort of there is a hodgepodge. And so that's why how we ended up with the system that we have now. No, and as far as Trump not being able to actually shut down the Department of Education, if you lay off the entire workforce, which Trump can do, then sure, it still exists on paper, but it's effectively dead.
Maybe he can. I mean, look, he's got this.
That's how I would try to do it.
He's got judges, reversing and ordering his cabinet departments to rehire people, right? Just today, the Department of Agriculture was ordered to rehire everyone that Trump wanted to fire. There's a bunch. I mean, it looks like basically Doge doesn't really have the right to fire anyone. Except unless they work for Doge.
Well, here's the thing. Let's just say, for example, if I worked for you, right? If I was your employee, let's just say I'm your producer.
Let's say
let's just use an example, right?
Yeah.
And you're paying me a salary, and you want me to go in and do your video editing and take care of all the stuff behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. If I don't do it, if you can't fire me, do I work for you?
Well, the
answer is no.
That's not the question. That's not the analogy. I can fire you because we have at-will employment in the United States, and unless you have a contract that says I can't fire you, I can fire you. Doge is like some dude walking down the street with his dog decides to call you up and says, I don't think you do a good job for Ted. So I think you got to go. You're fired. And they don't even ask me. And I'm like, I like Robby. I don't even want to. What do you mean you're firing him?
You're gone.
Yeah, we're firing Robby from you. What? That's what Doge is. Doge is just some rando.
Oh, I completely get it. But here's my question though. And maybe we can have Steve Gill on to explain the legality of it. How can a judge block an executive from doing mass layoffs? And if a judge can do that, then why can't judges just come in and say, okay, Joanne, you don't have the right to lay off all these people and shut down your stores? Or if
I can answer that question.
Answer this question.
Okay, I can answer that question. Because if you're a federal employee, you work for the relevant cabinet department or government agency, right? So let's just say, for example, let's say you're a soldier. Then you're an employee of the U.S. Department of the Army, okay, under the Pentagon. Well, even though Donald Trump is the commander in chief of the armed forces, he's not the CEO of the Department of the Army. He's not the secretary of the Army. The secretary of the Army is the highest authority when it comes to hiring and firing in the Army. So, I'm going to promote you to colonel. So Colonel West can't be fired by Donald Trump, but he can be fired by the Secretary of the Army. That's what it boils down to, is like forget about, like, that's in the military. You could make some argument that the commander in chief should have that ability, but let's just say it's the Department of Agriculture. The Secretary of Agriculture is the big poobah of the Agriculture Department.
So why wouldn't Trump just go tell the Secretary of Agriculture or the Treasury for the IRS, say, hey, I want you to fire all these people, and if you don't, I'm going to can you. He
could do that, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is that Doge, Elon Musk is popping into the Department of Agriculture and saying, like, you're fired, and the employees are saying, who the fuck are you? And we don't, and so we don't work for you. And so they're going to court and they're saying some weird dude who dresses strange is coming in and he's telling us we're fired. And the judge is like, yeah, you can't do that. It's really straightforward, I think.
So it's just a matter of the execution is where the problem is.
Yeah. No, totally. Donald Trump could absolutely order his cabinet department, his underlings, his direct, cabinet members to say, I want you to fire X number of people. I want you to fire this person. Now, the person could still avail themselves of the courts, but it would be hard. I mean, it's not going to be easy. I think what Trump was trying to do with Doge is he was trying to avoid direct responsibility of being the bad guy who's firing hundreds of thousands of people. And then if the economy goes tits up, everyone comes looking for him. He's like, this way, it's like, well, Elon Musk, he's on the spectrum. He doesn't care if everyone hates him. He's rich. It's like, Elon will take the fall. That's what this is about.
Gotcha. Okay, right. Yeah, I can see that. But thank you for explaining that to me. This is like, how the hell can the judges even stop him from doing this? It makes no sense to me. I mean, he's the boss.
It's like, but he's a boss, but he's not the boss. He's not the, what it is? He's not like in mafia parlance, the boss of bosses. He's not that. It doesn't work that way. And even the boss of bosses, right? Like the boss of bosses couldn't call up the head of the Gambino family and say, I want you to whack so-and-so. And they didn't have to do it. Now, on the other hand, he could have the head of the Gambino family whacked or threaten to do it and then tell him, I want you. So it's like that. It's a step removed.
Gotcha. Right. Okay, fair enough.
Trump's administration is planning to revoke temporary legal. I think this is a big story, Robby, because it's in many ways, if for anybody who's kind of wondering, where U.S. policy is headed towards Ukraine, this story to me maybe reveals more than stories that seem to be bigger, like that big press conference that happened on Friday. Trump's administration is planning to revoke temporary legal status for 240,000 Ukrainians who fled the conflict with Russia. That, according to a senior Trump administration and 3 other sources. This would put these Ukrainians on a fast track toward deportation. This could happen as soon as next month. And it would be a reversal of the welcome greeting that the Ukrainians got under Biden. The planned rollback of protections for Ukrainians was well underway before Trump publicly feuded with Zelensky last week. It's part of a broader effort to strip legal status from 1.8 million migrants allowed to enter the United States under temporary humanitarian parole programs launched under Biden. Migrants stripped of their parole status could face fast-track deportation, according to ICE. And of course, there's a separate story we're not going to get into. Well, we can, but we don't probably have a lot of time about just how the pace of deportations is a cause of great frustration to the Trump administration and a lot of people, I would imagine, like you. But there's also who support deportations. But I think this is like, if you're reading the tea leaves, like how serious, is Trump really, throwing the Yukis under the bus? Oh, I'd 100%. Say right here, right there, there's your proof.
Oh, I completely agree. And one of the things that even before this war started, Ukraine was in a demographic crisis, from the population collapse and stuff. So, I mean, this ultimately is a good thing for the Ukrainian nation, in my opinion. Go back home. Yeah. I mean, because if the war ends.
Oh, well, that will help. Fewer people getting killed will help.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, end the war and then encourage people to go back home. It's not even here. It's in Europe.
A lot of them are fleeing the draft too because they.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The war ends, you go back home, maybe start having babies and start rebuilding your country. I mean, that is a good thing. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with it.
Well, look, obviously, if you're gonna, if the Ukrainians don't have a war to go back to, there's no reason for them to stay here, right?
I agree.
When I was working at the financial aid department at Columbia in the early '90s, we had at least one student come in, and she had full tuition covered by the U.S. State Department. In other words, the taxpayers, and she admitted as a refugee, a political refugee from the Soviet Union. And I'm like, but the Soviet Union ceased to exist a couple of years ago. Why are you here? Well, I'm a refugee. Well, but the reasons for your refugee status are over. So, correct. Go home. It's very, very strange. Anyway.
Well, I mean, the way I see it, last thing I was saying, then now shut up because I know our guests will be coming up soon. I have no sympathy for you if you are in this country as a refugee waving the flag of the nation from which you came from. If you feel like strongly about it, then go back home and rebuild your home. You have agency. You can go back and make your home better.
Well, I mean, it's honestly like the end of World War II, right? There were tens of millions of Europeans who were caught, and others, who found themselves exiled and on the wrong side of borders. One of the most fascinating stories, and I've always wanted to write about this, but I've never been able to find an editor that was willing to pay for the research. But I don't know if you know this, but roughly 2,000 U.S. citizens found themselves in the former Soviet Union after 1945. Most of the Americans were, there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, but they were repatriated. But like 2,000 got stuck. And they were in the USSR, and they just couldn't get back because, like, the Cold War started, the Iron Curtain came down, and the U.S. and the USSR really weren't talking to each other. So they ended up living the rest of their lives there. Fascinating story. 1991, the Pentagon sent emissaries out to, what was now the Russian Federation and the 14 other former republics of the Soviet Union to try to track them all down. The Russians opened their archives and said, here's where they're all living. And they went one by one. There were still several hundred of them alive. And they had married, they had held jobs. A lot of them had, as you can imagine, had become English teachers and English-Russian translators. Some of them had worked for the FSB, as to teach them, to tutor them about America and whatever. But these were young men, right? They were American soldiers who were 18, 19, 20 years old. And it's just by accident. And they ended up having families there. Anyway, they were all, the few hundred who survived, they were all asked, hey, the Cold War's over. You can come back to the United States, to come back to Nebraska or whatever. And they're like, my life's here now, and I don't even think about the United States anymore. I speak fluent Russian or Kazakh or whatever, and I'm here. I just think it's a fucking fascinating story.
I agree with you. It's kind of like that little town in Brazil that was founded by Confederates who refused to surrender. Like the name of the town is like Americana or something like that. That's and when I visited Brazil, I actually went there. They have Confederate battle flags. At least when I was there on every street.
So weird,
because of they're descendants of Confederate soldiers who refused to surrender, so they went to Brazil.
That's kind of cool. It is kind of awesome. All right, so let's one last story, and I don't see. Oh, there he is. Okay, hey Achilles, we see you. We have one more story when we're going to bring you on. Jathan Gilder, 32 years old, told employees at Tiffany and Company at the mall at Millenia. I didn't know any malls were still around. I thought they'd all gone out of business. At about 1:45 p.m. on February 26th, that he was a rep of an Orlando Magic basketball player before he was taken to a VIP room and shown several high-end pieces of jewelry. That, according to the cops down there in Orlando. Gilder was shown a pair of nearly 5-carat diamond earrings worth $160,000, a pair of just over 8-carat diamond earrings. God, they gotta hurt your ears. Those are big diamonds worth $600,000, and a 5.5-carat diamond ring worth nearly $600,000, according to court documents. He then snatched the 3 pieces of jewelry, struggled with employees before he dropped the ring and took off. Mall security cameras captured images of Gilder fleeing in a blue Mitsubishi Outlander that detectives then traced to an Enterprise rent-a-car in Houston. The Florida Highway Patrol spotted him and his SUV at just before 8 o'clock at night on I-10 in Tallahassee, about 300 miles northwest of Orlando, taking what they called the fastest route back to Texas. As he was being taken into custody, however, Gilder swallowed several items. A scan of the suspect taken at the Washington County Jail found foreign objects in his stomach. These foreign objects, the cops say, are suspected to be the Tiffany & Co. earrings taken in the robbery, but will need to be collected after they pass through Gilder's system. In jail, Gilder spontaneously asked staff, "Am I going to be charged with what's in my stomach?" As Gilder was sitting in the patrol car, an arresting trooper heard him say, "I should have thrown them out the window," according to police.
Man, it's wild. No, back before I moved to Montana, I worked in the emergency room in Pensacola, Florida, and you would see so many people that if they get caught with the drugs or something, they would swallow their dime bags or something just to try and get away from it. And it was just like, that doesn't do you any good. Choice. No, that does you no good at all. And the funniest or most infamous story, if you want to call it that, this dude, he did that. He swallowed a dime bag. And then, of course, immediately what you do is that you pretend like that you faint or go into a coma or something, because then you have to go to the hospital first. Long story short, they put a catheter in this dude.
Oh, God.
And because a lot of times that's enough to wake a guy up. You'll start showing some life. This guy took it like this dude took it like a trumper, did not move, didn't flinch. I could not have done that. Just saying. Well, long story short, catheters are held in because there's a balloon at the end that expands at your bladder. Well, this dude obviously didn't know.
I hope this is something I never have to experience personally.
So he was laying down in the trauma room. Like 3 hours later, he gets up and runs with this catheter still in him, with predictable results when that balloon ripped out. It was a hellacious mess. That was, yes. Every man watching this stream right now can imagine what happened. He will never have
my balls are crawling back up inside.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So Achilles, this is the kind of high-end content that you're coming to today. Welcome.
This is what I have to follow.
All right, let's
100%.
Keep it classy.
Let's bring in Achilles. Achilles Larea Jr. is the founder and CEO
How am I
of Larea
supposed
Wealth
to follow
Management
this?
in New York City.
I have no idea.
Oh, we have no doubt you can do that.
You're a man of many talents.
I'll tell our personal gross stories. Yeah. So he's a personal CFO to Latino executives and entrepreneurs with over $1 million portfolios, a St. John's University graduate. And I don't know if this is true. I found this on AI. 3rd degree black belt. Is that true?
I'm 5th now.
Yeah.
I was supposed to
Oh,
be
okay. Oh,
going,
my apologies.
but
Remind me never
I,
to cause you offense.
I've been remiss in my practicing, so I can't even say I'm a karate guy as much anymore. I practice
Well,
outside in the mornings and do roughly 20 minutes of work, but aside from that, it's I can't even get to the dojo nowadays. It's because I'm so busy with business and what have you.
well, it's a good problem to have, but yeah, still, that's extremely impressive. I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine. So, congratulations on that. Maybe you'll get
Oh,
back to
thank
it.
you.
If the economy tanks next year, you'll have maybe more time on your hands.
I'm busier when it's worse.
Oh, I bet you get a lot of nervous calls from clients, right?
Not a lot, but new clients and prospective clients
Mm,
definitely reach out to you because they've been on the fence for a while or what have you, and they want to talk to an expert or they want to talk to someone who's out there, who's in the trenches.
gotcha. Well, let's talk about Donald Trump's. This was Robbie's idea to do this topic, and I really like it. The idea is that Donald Trump has promised to reindustrialize the Rust Belt, where I'm from. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. It was a well into a six-figure population when I grew up there. Headquarters of regional banks, factories. NCR was headquartered there. Defense Electronics Supply Corporation, Delco Moraine. Every S5 and S10 pickup truck in the world was made in Dayton or in Moraine, Ohio, just outside Dayton. And today, Dayton is a shell of what it used to be. And then that's a very typical problem. And, I would say it's a large part of the reason that Donald Trump is president of the United States, is he was able to go to places like Dayton, where he went often, and look out the window of his car and think, man, this must suck to live here. And people felt seen, and they voted for him. And so he's talking about he talked about bringing coal back. There's really apparently not much appetite for that for a variety of reasons. But he is now talking about reindustrializing the Rust Belt, and also this move with tariffs and tax cuts and deregulation, not to mention the attempt to revive the steel industry, appears to be tied in with this goal that he stated that he wants to revive, of all things, the shipbuilding industry in the United States, which has been long gone and we thought we'd never see again. So, we wanted to ask you, sort of about the pros and cons of this. I mean, Donald Trump, he says a lot of things that he doesn't seem to care much about. And then other things he cares deeply about. And, it's like, so, I mean, I can immediately see, the pros and cons. When I was a kid, and I would go, and I was growing up in Dayton, I developed asthma because the air was so bad from those factories. I remember the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland catching fire, which basically inaugurated the modern environmental movement. And when in the 1980s, so many companies went out of business in Ohio and Michigan that they stopped dumping toxins into Lake Erie. Lake Erie, which had been declared biologically dead by the EPA, there weren't even microbes, came back. Now you can catch big fish there. Nature has revived. So I can see, I could see the I want the jobs back. I want the banks back. I want my former neighbors to be able to afford to send their kids to college again. But I also don't know if I want an AQI of 290 every day like I used to have, and and everybody growing up with asthma, and and all the fish in Lake Erie dying again. So I don't know. I just wanted to get into it with you and see what do you think about this?
I think it's very interesting. He says a lot of things, but the truth of the matter is the devil's in the details. You're going to bring back coal, not a great idea. Will pollute even more the environment. And honestly, the thinking in my head is, what are we back in 50, 60 years ago? I don't understand
Mm,
this mentality. I think that there are plenty of other industries that could be brought to bear in an area like Dayton and the surrounding areas where you could make just as much, if not more, money. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, to have, say, whether it be call centers, whether it be AI data storage, things that just make sense in the here and now. We have not had steel in this country. I mean, what was the last? Pittsburgh still has one uh, thing left, one of those factories left.
U.S.
We haven't
Steel. That's the
had
last
that.
one.
Yeah, we haven't had that for the longest time, and simply because it is much cheaper to produce in other countries. You can't force an industry to bring it back here unless, what are we going to do? Are we going to pay these people slave labor wages? Because that's what you would have to do to really make it work here. All right. There would have to be some sort of industrialized zone of sorts to get away with this. But if you think about it, we're also inviting back not only environmental disasters. I mean, you talk about Lake Erie. I mean, you could talk about several areas that were declared. You know, the whole reason why we have super funds was because this kept happening again and again throughout the country, because there was no corporate responsibility. All right. The corporations were getting away with it. They're still getting away with it, just as not on a larger scale as they did back in the 50s and 60s, where it was known that a lot of these things could contaminate the water. It could contaminate, your foodstuffs, food supplies. And you mentioned, your asthma. I'm guessing there were plenty of other diseases as a direct result of these corporations being there. Do you really think that that won't happen again, and maybe 3 or 4 times worse, because of the amount of toxins? And before we had a certain amount, let's use the pot example for argument's sake. Let's say back in the 60s and 70s, pot had a certain amount of THC in it, right, which is the active ingredient. That's the stuff that gets you high. But can you imagine, the pot now has 3 to 7 times the amount. And now I'm just spitballing here, but you were talking about these companies which haven't been the most responsible of companies to come back in to let that damage happen. It would accelerate, I would say, fivefold, tenfold. And instead of ruining the environment in, say, 3 years, we're talking maybe one, where you're starting to see all these adverse effects on people. And then, what are you going to do from there? Oh, I'm sorry, we knew about it, but, which was the case. Most of these companies knew, it's kind of like cigarettes. They know it was toxic. They knew it caused cancer. They knew that there were plenty of adverse effects from smoking, yet they still function. And once they got you hooked, you were in there, and to the day, that is still the case. And then I don't have anything against that. If that's your thing, I'm not going to tell you, don't smoke. All right. But so long as you know the risk that you run by doing so, then, that's on you. So I see these companies, I see, shipbuilding, that's super interesting to me. I was like, okay, so we're going to build a shipyard here, in Dayton, for argument's sake. And
Well,
we're
it
going to
won't
bring
be in
that,
Dayton. It'll be in Baltimore, let's say.
right.
Right.
Okay, let's say
Or
Baltimore.
Norfolk.
All right. Where traditionally those industries were housed, if I remember correctly. And you're going to build your ships there, but how much are you going to pay these people? If we go do it somewhere else in the world, we can get it for a third of the price.
Well, I
That
think the
is
argument
still the
would be,
case.
and I can really argue this both ways as I set it up, right? But I mean, I think the argument in favor would be to say, maybe we don't have to pay slave wages to make this work. I mean, you're talking about stuff that is intrinsically very, very heavy and expensive to transport. Steel, all the stuff that goes into shipbuilding. So if you made steel here, and you hire American workers to make the steel, you hire American workers to truck the steel or railroad it, through intermodal transport, to shipbuilding facilities. I mean, it seems to me like it could be, it could be, you wouldn't necessarily have to pay, low wages, because there's economies to be made because it's already here, right? I mean, so I don't know. I can see how it could work.
Been here for a very long time, and I don't see how economically this is going to be a viable thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about major components for a huge endeavor. I get that we could conceivably do it here. I don't think it would be to the company, whoever's manufacturing it. It's not going to be to their benefit, because really, how much are they going to get back as far as their investment is concerned?
It does feel very 20th century, right? It's like, instead of like going with the way things are and adapting to that, it's like, let's go back to the way things were.
Ted, look at China right now, right? China is no longer the big boy when it comes to the clothing, the industrial industries. That's happening now. That's going to Mexico right now. It's cheaper to produce those goods there. So, and then on top of that, China has a huge problem that there's not going to be enough of a population to fund the retirements of the elderly in that country. Everybody went through World War II. And if we look at just the population segments of the elderly, you would need 2 to 3 more times population in order to fund that pension scheme going forward. And they just don't have it. Real estate, another area in China that just, can't be supported by the numbers out there right now. We see a little of that here, but I'm not sure, to me, this is just sounding a little bit more like a gimmick, another Trump gimmick. This doesn't, I don't care what you think of the guy. I think you got to have ideas, of course, but I think these are not the ones that will carry us in to the next century, which is what I believe that he should be doing.
Here's the view from Middle America where I am. I'm in the part of the country that everyone always forgets. The tone on the street here, and I guarantee you this is going to be the same whether you're in Montana or in Ohio or Kentucky or Illinois. Pick your flyover state. The tone on the street here is that inflation goes up 2 to 4% every year. Our wages are shrinking because the wages aren't keeping up. So then it becomes a struggle. You can forget about buying a car. You can forget about ever buying a house. It's never going to happen. I will never own a home. That's just, it is impossible unless something just drastically changes. It's never going to happen for me. And there's millions of people who are like that. And so they see, all the talk going on about this 21st century economy. But the problem is that the American middle class is being destroyed in the process by it. At least that's how it feels. Like, right now, my wife and I, we're going over looking at our budgets. Like, okay, so with the price of food, rent goes up every year. I simply do not care about what the economy is going to look like 10 years from now. I care about right now, where that's Trump's powers. Like, I hear you, I see you. Wall Street has forgotten you. The political class, Republican and Democrat alike, not only do they not listen to you, they actively hate you. That's the feeling on the street. And so whenever Trump comes out and says, I'm going to rack up these tariffs to make it so much more expensive for companies to outsource those jobs, like to your point, to foreign workers because it's cheaper, that way I can bring these industries back and start bringing high-paying jobs where you could actually, buy a car, or be able to invest in the stock market, or be able to actually start building a life. And so, like to Ted's point about the environment, I'm in Montana. It's beautiful here. You can't eat the scenery. And so that's what people are looking at. It's like on the Crow Indian Reservation. When the coal mine there got shut down, the unemployment rate there is about 80% now. It's insane. And so people in the middle of the country, like, we hear what the analysts are saying. We don't care, because we cannot afford to live. And if Trump is able to deliver on some of this stuff, I promise both of you is that Trump will win the midterms, and his MAGA faction, love it or hate it, will become a force that cannot be stopped because Trump will capture that working class anger and build on it. Where am I going wrong on this?
I don't think you're going wrong on any of this. You see it firsthand. I see it here in New York City. I mean, the have and have nots, there's a big disparity that will continue to grow. And you know who the biggest culprit in this? Corporations, because
Yeah.
wage stagflation is at all-time highs. We've seen that they are not keeping up. They're showing it's a mixed message because you're seeing they're showing record profits. They're paying their CEOs X amount of money, and this in turn is showing middle America that, like you said, the companies, we don't care about you. Wall Street doesn't care about you. You know, the answer is not easy. The answer is actually begins on the grassroots level, in my opinion, from the local congressperson there. You know, I'll give you an example. In New York City, you have congressmen here who are still going out to the food banks here, who are still in touch with the people, you know, like her or not, AOC, right? Uh, she is in Elmhurst, Queens. She is in Queens in general and the Bronx all the time. She does not sit from a perch in Washington, D.C. Anytime the Republicans have tried to knock her out of the race, she has destroyed them by usually 80 to 90% versus their candidate. All right. Why? Because she understands, and she talked about it a little bit. I saw on social media the other day, she was talking about this thing where if your prices keep going up, and that with the tariffs, to me, make this move on the tariff unconscionable. It doesn't make sense to me. All right. We are not, this country was built on tariffs. If you think about it, back in the 1800s, the 1700s, there was no IRS at the time. But at the same time, we are not in the same world. You would be dragging us back 100 years to a place where kids were still working, all right, 9 to 5 or 12 hours in the factory, severed hands, fires occurring in factories with no payments going out to families. Do you really want to go back to that? I think people love the idea, hey, put me to work, put my kids to work or whatever, whatever it needs to do. But if a company came out, to middle America, there's going to be a lot more concessions. What they should be doing there is creating special tax zones for these companies and a living wage that everybody can be proud to have.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? Like I said, you create a special tax zone, you create a special industrial zone that benefits the companies, but in turn, you got to have an agreement and say, hey, we're giving you all these breaks, we're giving you all these things, but you have to hire local people, for X percentage of your workforce. I mean, I don't want to see people coming in from New York.
And
I don't
X
want to see
number
people.
of them.
Correct.
And you have to stay open for X amount of time.
If
Correct.
I
You just can't up and leave.
Reagan, I think it was, who started these enterprise zones, and they didn't work because they didn't really hold the company's feet to the fire.
Right. There was no accountability with those companies. Absolutely. I thought it was a good idea in theory, but without holding these companies accountable, you say to the company, hey, we're going to, we expect you to hire X amount of people in this amount of time. And if you don't do it, guess what? One segment of your tax, or we're going to increase your taxes by the percentage that we agreed upon. Once again, the devil's in the details. I think this might be more effective than just saying we're going to bring all these industries back. And, if you look at like the car industry going back and forth, they go back and forth from both Mexico and Canada, for the parts and the like that are made in this free trade zone we used to have. Now no longer, because we're looking for someone to blame so we can get more tax cuts for the rich. Let's call it what it is. All right. So in my opinion, the only way to fix that is everybody sit down. At the end of the day, this is about money.
Sure.
Sit down. Let's
Always.
talk about it. Let's create a special agreement between Mexico, the United States, and Canada that everybody benefits. So that way, middle Canada benefits. Blue collar workers benefit more than anything. You know what? Blue collar built this country and built many countries. You having good people who work and earn a decent wage, a living wage, is the way out of this, in my opinion.
I agree. And I think this is about money, but I think more than that, Achilles, I think in this case, it's more about stability, because there's so many people who are giving up on voting. They're giving up on the system. They're completely unplugged, and all they feel is despair. And then that despair then becomes anger. And if someone's listening, Angie Wong, I know you're watching right now. If you want to unseat AOC in New York City, I can tell you how. And I can answer your question also about tariffs. AOC going to the to the Bronx and stuff, doing her little photo ops is great. But you want to know how you take her out? This is how you take her out, Angie. Listen to me. If you want to win that seat in New York, you go there and say, instead of you being here in this food line, how about if we bring these apparel companies there in Mexico because of the tariffs? Let's raise the tariffs. Let's make it more affordable for these companies to be here and start building apparel factories here in the Bronx again. Let's bring jobs here. That way you don't have to be in
what you're talking about has already been happening. The last Bronx borough manager, and you have to live here to really know the situation, what's going on here. So no offense to you, but
no, I don't know.
We're not talking about AOC just doing that. We're talking about there is a concerted effort in the Bronx by the borough manager, by
President.
the head of the borough there.
Ferrer, right?
I don't know at this point.
Yeah, because you two are neighbors, ain't you? Y'all both live in New York City.
Yeah,
well, yeah, New York City is 5 boroughs. Everybody forgets there's 5 boroughs here, 5 counties, and we all work together. I mean, we try to work together for the same goals, which is to have that living wage, to have that quality of life. You know what? What really has taken off here? Technology. There are spaces for technology, where the big corporations. I mean, at one point we had to talk Google coming in at one point, and that fizzled out because they didn't want to play by the rules. They did not want to be accountable to New York City. And, basically we said, no, absolutely not.
AOC told Amazon to go to hell too in Queens. And and this might break people's brains outside of New York City, but that was a popular decision on her part. New Yorkers were like, yeah, bye Amazon, see ya. Because these were subpar wages.
Not only were they subpar, but you have to remember, New York is one of the most, in comparison, I think only Los Angeles compares, but New York is one of the, if not the most expensive places to live. So you cannot get away with coming here and deciding, hey, we're going to pay a subpar wage and get away with it. It's not going to happen. The unions say no.
Not to mention Amazon was going to get all sorts of city. They were going to get all sorts of city tax breaks.
Absolutely.
Why?
Right. It's like, exactly. They have plenty of money. Give them some breaks, of course. Encourage the business, but to make it where economically, for a family whose parents are working in these shops, not the right decision.
What works for New York is what doesn't necessarily work in Montana, right? I mean, New York has a highly educated workforce. It's high population density, very expensive real estate, so it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Base.
Right. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have, big factories, employing people who don't need a college degree to do those jobs or to get hired to do those jobs. It's true that for us, AI and programming and all that, coding, and getting people who are all living close to one another and doing knowledge-based stuff makes more sense because we all live next. New York City's a big city, but it's vertical, and nothing's really that far from each other. You could be, the furthest part of the Bronx to the furthest part of Manhattan by subway is maybe an hour and 15 minutes. It's not that bad, and it could be faster sometimes. So it's like we're interconnected in a way that other places aren't. So I think that's an important thing. Speaking of AI, I asked AI about this topic about achievability of Trump's goals. I thought you'd find this amusing. AI says modernizing infrastructure and securing funding would face political gridlock and budget constraints. The odds are 50 to 60% with bipartisan support, right? So no bipartisan support, obviously, right? I don't think. Training a workforce is feasible, 70% chance, if education aligns with demand, which these days is totally not the case, right? There's tons of people who need jobs, tons of employers who say they can't find people to fill the positions that they need because they don't have the right educations. And supply chain retooling is tougher, 40 to 50%, given global competition and cost. Government commitment via defense spending, which Trump is going to cut, and or protectionist policies could push success to 60 to 70%, but sustained effort over decades is key. And that's when I started laughing. America doesn't do sustained effort over months, much less decades.
Let me ask Robby a question. Robby,
Sure.
let's just say for argument's sake, I'm a big company. I come into Montana where you are, and I say, okay, for the most part, we're going to give you paid training,
Right.
but it's going to be a third of what you would normally make, right? But you really need to know how to operate the next phase of this evolution that's going to occur here, but by the end of it, your wage is going to be, let's just say the median wage there is 40,000, right? They say by the time we're done, you should be at 35 to 38, 35 to 40, as far as the band is concerned, that wage band, or higher. All right.
Sure.
Would you welcome that? Would you sit
100%.
down, do the training, go through it? It might take 6 months to a year. I know that most people would, but the question is, would we hold the company accountable for that training? Because training costs them money. They're going to, any big business that moves into an area, they lose months. I want to say 8 months or a year. Easily, they lose money for that entire period until everything is up and going. And I think that is really the way in Middle America to make people interested. I don't think that this idea of going back and, I know that some people will just take any job, but at this
right now here,
particular
it's all about
point,
just surviving. It's all about just surviving right now. Forget about the job that you want to have. It's literally, here, Achilles, and I'm sure, I speak for probably 90% of Middle America right now.
It's here too.
It's all about just simply surviving. It's about just being able to pay the rent and then decide what bill am I going to be late on this month so I can get groceries for my kids. That is the reality.
Absolutely. And when you are thinking that way, pardon me for saying this, your mind cannot think of bigger things.
Of course.
And that is the perfect way that companies, corporations keep a certain percentage of the population down. Right? It is exactly their program, whether conscious or not. This is the way they keep people below middle class, and that they can control people more so who are at that level, because you cannot think big if you can't make your rent, if you can't buy your kids things. Absolutely not. So we have to find something that gets them on the road to, okay, like I mentioned, the training's going to start here. We're going to pay 80% of what your wage is going to be. Then it goes up. The longer you're in there, the higher it goes up. So let's say 6 months from now, you get a pay increase. 6 months after you get, and then all of a sudden you're at 100%. So the next thing you know, instead of 40,000, you're closer to 50,000.
Do you want me to tell you why that would never happen?
Please.
H-1B visas. It is cheaper for companies, and this is one of the reasons why people on the right, like me, absolutely hate them. And I'm sure there's a lot of bleed over on the left too, because there is no incentive for companies like what you're talking about to come in and start training people, investing in that human capital, build that workforce domestically. If you can hire a foreigner that already is trained for 60%, and they're already able to bring that full load in. So
Right.
that's the daylight between me and Trump. Like I'm a MAGA conservative. I'm not a Republican. I hate the Republican Party. I despise them because, I mean, they made it very clear they're not for me. But the split that you see on the right is between what you just talked about, investing in the American population versus the country club Republicans who want to bring in foreign serfs, let's call them what it is, H-1B visa holders, to depress those wages. And that's what I'm saying. What Trump is doing now, he's pushing for stability. I think that if he's able to win the working class and say, listen, I'm fighting for you, and these asshole Republicans and Democrats are the ones who are actively screwing you, they're voting against what I'm trying to do, he will win the midterms. And to borrow a Trumpism, he will win bigly, because this is about building
I don't disagree.
I
don't disagree. I think when you appeal to a large segment of the population that's suffering, that's going through this, and that the corporations are not on board with, like you said, having these visas
Well, they're incentivized not to.
redacted, and the like. But here's the thing: at some point, we have to get on board with getting some people aboard.
I agree.
Domestically. And
Things
the
are going to
question
explode.
now goes back to the corporations: are they willing to go and do this?
Yeah,
And
either that or they're going to deal with political instability that's going to hurt their bottom line in a major way. We're going to have to leave that there, Achilles, but thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to see you. Achilles Larrea Jr. is the founder and CEO of Larrea Wealth Management here in New York City. Since 2002, he's been a personal CFO to Latino executives and entrepreneurs with $1 million plus portfolios, a graduate of St. John's University and a 5th degree black belt. He's a frequent media contributor on wealth strategies.
Let me throw something out real quick. Ted, real quick. Okay. I'm reading Achilles' book, Wise Up With Your Money. So I'm reading 2 books right now. I'm reading Ted's book. It's not out yet, and I'm reading his. And if you are interested at all in finance and trying to figure out just how to make your dollar stretch a little bit, I'm telling y'all, buy his book. It's on Amazon. Great read. I am not paid by him to push his book. I'm just telling you, it's a damn good book. Go buy it.
I appreciate that.
All right. And with that, talk to you soon, and have a great day, Achilles. Okay. All right. So with that, I think we're going to leave that there. Thank you so much, Robby, for guest hosting for Manila. We'll be doing this again tomorrow. Please subscribe.
It was fun.
It was, definitely super interesting. Thank you for that topic. Please subscribe to the TMI Show here on Rumble. It's on the lower right-hand corner. You'll see a little green box, a little oval that says subscribe. That's how you would subscribe. You got to do it while we're on the air. So either do it really quick right now or do it later in the day when we have the rerun after we post it. Please become a paid subscriber, $5 a month, so we can keep doing it. So we are fully independent, and don't whine if we go away because we can't do it if you guys didn't support us. I mean, it's like when you walk by that store that goes out of business and you're like, I loved that store. Did you ever buy anything there? No. Not really. Okay. All right. Well, I guess you didn't really love that store. So anyway, Robby, I'll see you tomorrow. We will see everyone tomorrow. And thanks again. See ya.
Bye, y'all.